Welcome to the Exploress. Time traveling through women's history, one era at a time. I'm Kate Armstrong. What does it mean to be an empress? The word comes from Old French, but its roots stretch back to the Latin imperium. It means a command. It means authority. It means power over a realm. But what does it really mean to be a woman with power over so many? What does it look like when an empire allows a woman to rule? In this series, we will travel with 3 different empresses, exploring their reigns, their worlds, and what it might have been like to be them. A woman stands tall on a battlefield, praying. Before her, women rush to get water to the wounded. Behind her, others stanch wounds and offer what comfort they can. As cannons blast, she shouts encouragement to the soldiers who load them, telling them to stand firm, not to give in. Her women's army will help win this battle against the European power who wants to conquer her country. This empress will gamble everything to keep her country free. Today, we're traveling back to Africa at the turn of the 20th century. The British, French, and German empires have come to hold the majority of African territory, but one country has remained free of white colonial rule. That country is Ethiopia, ruled by Emperor Menelik II and his empress, Taytu Betul. Let's walk with Taytu as she co-reigns with Menelik as one half of her era's ultimate power couple, and explore the daily lives of the Ethiopian women under her rule. Grab a rifle and a healthy handful of butter. Let's go traveling. But first, a shout out to some of my patrons. My warrior queens, Alexis, Amanda, MCF, Amy, Kate, Ika, Jessie, June, Neve and Sloan, and Sarah. My imperial empresses, Alyssa, Faye and Whimsy Soapworks, Letitia, Sally, Samara, and Teresa. And my lady pharaohs, Bridget, the Courtneys, Kot, Kate, Kimberly, Laura, Lori, and Sophie. Patrons are a huge part of what keeps the show going. I say it every time, and every time it's still true. They get all episodes early and ad-free. They also get exclusive bonus episodes, including one I've just dropped about another African woman who changed her world, Kimpa Vita. To find out all about this prophetess, just click on the link in my show notes. Let's start by placing ourselves in time. We're nearing the turn of the century. In America, we're smack in the middle of what's called the Gilded Age. We're seeing rapid technological advancement the world over, and the so-called robber barons have struck it filthy rich. In 1896, America will hold the world's first automobile race in Chicago. Before long, we'll start seeing airplanes take to the sky. But unions are also fighting for better working conditions, and social welfare organizations are protesting the awful conditions of the working poor. Over in Europe, trouble is brewing. A mix of intense nationalism, secret alliances, and economic rivalry are sowing the seeds for what will become World War I. Meanwhile, the British Empire has reached its peak. 1896 will see Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, aka her 60th anniversary of ruling stuff, and the Brits are feeling pretty good. Of course, colonialism is a major feature of that empire. and all the major colonial powers are fighting tooth and nail over a prime piece of the world, the continent of Africa. But let's go back to 1850. That's the year our girl Taytu is born. She's the third of 4 siblings, all of whom will survive to adulthood, which is a pretty rare event at this time in Ethiopia. She is born in the family's residence, where her father is a governor, and her mother is a very prominent lady from a royal line. So Taytu's got a bit of a silver spoon situation, but childbirth, as in most eras, is a perilous journey for an Ethiopian woman, especially because so many of them are giving birth very young. If you're wealthy, like Taytu's mother, you'll be sent to bed to rest in the lead up to childbirth, while poorer women will keep working right up until labor begins. That's when mom enters the birthing hut, a place that's off limits to both virgins and barren women. Rude, though perhaps they appreciate this. These are small, unventilated spaces. They often have a man's pants placed on their roofs and sulfur burned inside. Both of these things are meant to ease labor pains. Look, whatever gives you peace of mind, honey. Lucky for us, we won't have meddling male doctors and their dirty hands to contend with. In the birthing hut, it's a midwife who runs the show. She places the mother on a buttered stone slab and rubs her belly with it too, greasing the wheels, as it were, for childbirth. Our female relatives will cluster around to assist. If labor is prolonged, priests will bless some water for the mother to drink. If that doesn't work, attendants will wash the father's knees, then get the mother to drink his knee water. Okay. If even that fails, a gun is fired to try and scare the baby out. Sure, let's give it a go. Hopefully, no shots are fired as Taytu emerges. The midwife will catch her in a wicker basket filled with flour or straw, then wash her body in cold water. The women announce the baby's sex, and the father fires a rifle, or he cheers, 7 times for a boy and 3 for a girl. A female baby's placenta is buried outside and to the left of the house, symbolizing her future departure into some other man's home, while a boy's is buried inside and to the right, symbolizing that he will follow his father. So, yeah, from birth, we've got a bit of disparity between how boys and girls are treated. If you're wealthy, the mother will stay in the birthing hut for 40 days after giving birth, but poor ladies will get right back to work, which is probably healthier at any rate. Hold on to your hats, because in Ethiopia, all babies are circumcised. Boys on the 8th day and girls between the 15th and 80th. And look, I'm not gonna lie, the next few seconds are gonna be squeamish. For girls, the labia minora is trimmed, a procedure we'd now call genital mutilation. This is often done with unsterilized tools. The amount trimmed isn't as extreme in the area Taytu is born as in some other parts of Africa, but oral history still blames this for the fact that Taytu will later be unable to bear children. Sterility is quite common in Ethiopia at this time, aided by very young marriages, the unfortunate prevalence of STDs, and the vigorous vaginal douching that most women take part in twice daily. One might say this isn't an easy place to be a girl. Next up for Taytu will come the baptism, which usually happens on the baby's 80th day. Priests purify the mother and the birthing hut with holy water, and then the mother carries her baby to church. They're both shaded by a parasol, while a male relative walks ahead with a knife or sword to keep away evil spirits. This ceremony is not for the faint of heart. Over 2 hours long, full of singing and praying from both the Old Testament and the massive Ethiopian Book of Baptism, which is so big it takes 2 men to hold. Now that all that ceremony's out of the way, what is life like for a gal like Taytu? If you haven't gathered this already, I'm gonna tell ya. Ethiopia is definitely a patriarchy. The following proverb nicely summarizes the status of women.
When a woman is born, the demons enter her feet. When grown, the demon has reached her forehead, and then her head when he wakes up in his abode. When a male is born, the demon attacks him in the forehead, and the demon descends, and this man becomes brave, serious, and perfect.
So, women are demonic and men are perfect? Not off to a rip-roaring start. We see all the usual suspects of patriarchy in Ethiopia. Men are prized for aggressiveness, while women are prized for submissiveness. One popular saying goes as follows:
There is no trouble, no quarrel, worse than a loud, bad woman.
Adultery is condemned for all, but women are punished way more severely for it. If a couple can't conceive, you guessed it, the woman is usually blamed. And yet Ethiopian women have some freedoms that many European women at the time don't. Contraception is technically forbidden, but abortion isn't prosecuted unless the husband is the accuser. Family planning is made simpler thanks to herbs and plants like koso. Ethiopian society is also much more sexually free than European society. Polygamy and prostitution are both common and pretty accepted, as are having relationships and children outside of marriage. When two Frenchmen visited the country in 1837, they wrote,
"We were shocked because our minds were not so open."
The Ethiopia that Taytu is born into is still very agrarian, fragmented into kingdoms and regional duchies. It has no international empire to speak of, no large city centers, and a pretty simple economy. Though it's not what Europeans at the time would call modern, it's also not some undeveloped nation of tiny tribes and backwaters. It simply looks the way Europe did before industrialization. Taytu Betul can expect a pretty cushy childhood because she comes from a highly prominent royal family. She's the granddaughter of Emperor Susenyos of the Solomonic dynasty, a line that claims descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Founded in 1270, the Ethiopian Empire, also called the Abyssinian Empire, has been around for quite a while, but lately it's seen a lot of internal strife. Taytu is born into the Zamana Massafent, otherwise known as the Era of the Princes, a very messy time of feudal anarchy where warlords fight each other for power. After the emperor was killed in 1769, a series of puppet emperors paraded into the spotlight, but they were little more than figureheads. The empire hasn't seen anything like centralized power for quite a while. So, does Taytu get an education? Well, most girls don't. Instead, most girls are kept at home, where they do learn skills like weaving and cooking from their mothers. Not sewing, though. In Ethiopia, that's a man's job. But since Taytu's royal, she is getting a bit more academic attention. She'll learn to read and write in Amharic, becomes fluent in Ge'ez, the language of sacred texts, writes poetry, and plays chess. She's also well known for her skill on the bagana, a 10-string lyre instrument. So, a bit of a Renaissance gal. Unfortunately, her childhood also sees a lot of drama. Taytu's father dies when she's just 3 years old, in the battle that ends Ras Ali's rule and leads to the coronation of a new emperor in 1855, a guy named Tewodros. He will reunify the empire, which is great, right? Well, that depends which side of the war your family is fighting on. Taytu's older brothers, both of them soldiers, fought on the losing side. They become prisoners of the new emperor in 1857. Taytu's mom, now widowed, remarries. Of course she does. For a woman, it's the surest path to security. But she still has to flee the war, taking her family to a monastery her new hubby owns. My, that took a dark turn quickly. But imprisonment for Taytu's brothers isn't all bad. While in the slammer, they happen to meet a guy named Menelik. He's a young prince of the regional ruler of Shewa, seen as a threat to the emperor's power. Menelik becomes great chums with Taytu's brothers. He admires them so much that he asks if they have a sister he might marry. We sure do! So when Menelik finally escapes prison, he goes and asks for Taytu's hand. But her family demurs, too afraid of getting on Emperor Tewodros' naughty list. Instead, they marry Taytu off to one of the emperor's main officers. She is only 10 years old. Neat. Marriage is expected in Ethiopia, especially for women. In a time when they have few means of security, it provides them safety. At least, that's the idea. The Fatha Nagast, the law book of Ethiopia, says that every child has the right to marry. Parents can even be sued for not arranging it. Both polygamy and monogamy are practiced, depending on the region, family, and whether a dude can afford several wives. Girls usually marry quite young, between 10 and 12. Don't like that! While boys marry a bit later, around 15 to 18. Taytu's marriage at 10 is, unfortunately, pretty typical. No surprise, given how young they begin their married lives, that girls often end up having several husbands, and often end up having trouble with childbearing. Italian diplomat Pietro Antonelli wrote, after spending time in the Ethiopian court, that there was hardly a girl over 10 who was a virgin, or a woman of 30 who had not had 5 or 6 husbands. That sounds exhausting, frankly. But look, it's not all doom and gloom in child marriage over here. Women in Ethiopia have equal rights when it comes to inheritance law, and it's fairly easy to divorce a husband if you are so inclined. As one lame man complains in 1838,
When women began inheriting land, they lost their submissiveness, and from that stemmed disrespect for marriage.
oh no. Women can initiate divorce for any number of reasons. Lack of conjugal rights, absenteeism, insanity, impotence, simple incompatibility. Even because she wants to try and find a richer husband, grounds that Taytu will use with impunity. Other good news, a woman is legally able to take her dowry with her, as well as a third of her former spouse's property. Married women aren't as financially strapped here as their counterparts in Europe. The most common reason men file for divorce is infertility or incompetence at domestic duties. Don't like your husband? Start breaking the dishes, girl. Unfortunately, the most common reason women file for divorce is domestic abuse. It's a serious problem in Ethiopia. Even Taytu is beaten by her jealous first husband, and he isn't the only one. She manages to leave him, but not before taking a great deal of his money, property, and servants with her. Mess about and find out, my man. If you aren't a powerful lady like Taytu, though, your options for justice are more limited. Many women go to the hakim, a doctor who uses traditional herbal remedies, to try and prevent domestic abuse from happening at all. One of their prescriptions for this reads,
Take a hair from your husband's head. Say the magic formula as you bury half of the hair in the ground and carry the other half in an amulet around the neck.
The hakim also has prescriptions for men looking to cure flirtatious wives.
Take 7 files, mix with hyena dung, and massage your genital organ while repeating the magic formula 49 times. Then have sexual intercourse with her.
Well, that sounds unpleasant for everyone. When magic formulas fail, the victim and her family can demand a fine for each incidence of violence. This often simply means a husband will continue the abuse until he literally can't afford to beat his wife anymore. Taytu will marry and divorce multiple men. She uses her unions to seek wealth and power. And you know what? More power to you, Taytu. Her first marriage, as we know, is an unhappy one. Aside from the abuse, he also falls from favor with the emperor. As a result, Taytu is forced to follow him and the army on foot, chained at the wrist and expected to cook for all the soldiers. We are not Team Tewodros over here. Luckily, Taytu has no problem trading in husbands as one might an out-of-date phone. She will marry 2 more soldiers, then a governor, then a military commander who doesn't mind ending arguments with his fists. Finally, after years of roller coaster romance and, frankly, some real duds, she meets Menelik II, the man who asked for her hand all those years ago. He will turn out to be her true partner and the love of her life. Menelik has been busy in the years since he fled prison. He went back to being Prince of Showa, building up his military and expanding his territory, which expands quite a lot more once he marries Taytu in 1882. Girls got connections. A popular saying at the time?
Nearly half of Ethiopia is in the hands of her relatives.
Her wealth and powerful associations make her an ideal partner for Menelik, but it seems he's also pretty smitten with her. Bonus, she seems to like him too. Although polygamy is considered totally fine for Ethiopian rulers, Taytu isn't having it. She refuses to share Menelik with any other wives. These two have a lot in common. They've both been married before. They're both middle-aged, mature, and have experienced suffering and violence. Most importantly, though, they both have big ambitions, both for themselves and the empire. When the current emperor, a guy named Johannes, attacks Showa, Menelik's army defeats him, and he takes up that crown and scepter. He is crowned King of Kings in 1889. Taytu is crowned Itege, or Queen of Queens. She is 39 years old, and she isn't here to stand behind her husband. She's here to rule beside him. Their thrones are placed as equals, side by side. Ruling comes pretty naturally to this power couple. They set rules, but they also give a lot back to their people. As we've learned, two of the main hallmarks of an empress's rule is how much they build and how much they give. Taytu's quite well known on both counts. When a famine strikes the country in the first years of their reign, Menelik and Taytu set up aid stations and personally hand out food to thousands. They import grain from Europe and teach their people to till the land. Menelik even works in fields himself. Oh well, hey there. Taytu, meanwhile, develops a reputation for her piety. She assists Ethiopian pilgrims in Jerusalem after a crisis leaves them stranded without housing. She collects 300,000 thalers for them, rebuilds their church, and even appoints her own cleric to oversee their provisions and housing. Menelik is also busy doing some saber swinging. He consolidates and expands the Ethiopian empire, waging war against neighboring kingdoms. And while he's off doing that, Taytu is left in charge of things, and she proves herself as steely and hardcore as her husband. When rebels, led by a guy named Zeje, threaten her governor brother and his family, Taytu sends her army to protect them. She also sends this message to the people who threatened him.
Take care that no dissension explodes between me and you. As for Zeje, if I should hear that you permitted him to enter and govern Yeju, or even if I learn that you allowed him to drink water in Yeju from his cupped hand, we will become, you and I, mortal enemies.
Another time, when Menelik is called away to battle, he sends his begrudging lady off for her safety. That night, hundreds of his deserting soldiers unknowingly camp nearby. Disgusted by their cowardice, she sends them the following note.
If all these soldiers have come to guard me, I congratulate them. But if they intend to run away, their heads are mine, and their belongings will go to those who capture them.
They come to the royal tent begging for food and mercy. In response, she has her soldiers chain them up for treason. Damn, Taytu! When Menelik isn't waging war, he's modernizing Ethiopia and building a new, shiny capital city. Taytu dubs it Addis Ababa, or the New Flower. This is where the emperor entertains foreign visitors, meeting with scribes and translators, attending banquets with allies and nobles, and presiding over their supreme court. This is where he gives out legal rulings, as any person in Ethiopia has the right to seek redress from the emperor. What's his main lady up to, you ask? Ethiopian women hold many jobs and roles. They are hakims, soothsayers, marriage counselors, hairdressers, tattoo artists, domestic servants, potters, midwives, sex workers, weavers, cooks, basket makers, traders. When they stay at home, they're also working hard, cooking, carrying water, fetching wood, collecting animal dung, gardening, spinning cotton, brewing beer, and, of course, raising the children. No rest for the wicked, am I right? As Empress, Taytu's workload looks different than most ladies, but there's some definite overlap when it comes to household management. She supervises the kitchens and gardens, visits the sewing ateliers and weavers, plans events with staff, and dictates correspondence to her scribes. She goes to church and plays music in her apartments with her ladies. She also attends political meetings with Menelik and his advisors. One of Menelek's doctors observes that
Taytu applied herself not only to feminine works, but like Quicksilver, attended to perplexing business, usually done by men, and succeeded at it.
And that's what I like to call multitasking. Like many of the ruling couples we'll meet in our Empress series, Taytu and Menelik seem to enjoy an equal partnership. They rule together in pretty much every sense of the word. It's a balance of opposites situation. Menelik is extroverted, charming, and idealistic, an excitable golden retriever to Taytu's introverted, cautious black cat. Menelik's most famous saying is Ishi nega, which means yes, tomorrow, and Taytu's is imbi, or absolutely not. But there's one Empress duty Taytu isn't able to perform. She never has children with Menelik. He has a daughter from a previous marriage, but no legitimate male heirs. Still, their court is filled with the kids of their relatives and nobles, and also some love children, whom Taytu treats with great love and care. She's busy and fulfilled. Ethiopia is thriving, and while countries like France recognize Ethiopia and its rulers as an equal nation, not a colony, there are those who would like to seize it as their own. Most of Europe is deep in their colonization era. The British, French, and German empires have already carved up most of Africa. The Italians, who were late to the empire party, are beginning to feel a little bit left out. They think that quickly seizing a colony in Africa will help establish them as a major world power. Ethiopia, they think, will be easy pickings. After all, everyone knows that Emperor Menelik is easy to sway. He likes to think the best of people. So when he signs a treaty with the Italians in 1889, he does it in good cheer and with good faith. It's an agreement of friendship in which both countries hold hands, promise military and trade support, and recognize each other's sovereignty. At least, that's what the treaty says in Amharic, the language of Ethiopia. In Italian, it says that Ethiopia is now a protectorate and must conduct all its foreign affairs through Italy. Wait, has someone made a translation mistake here? No, honey. The Italians knew exactly what they were doing. Menelik tries to get them to sign a new agreement. When they refuse, he sends a letter complaining to every major European power, tattling on Italy for being so duplicitous. Italy responds by breaking out the big guns, moving their military into Ethiopia and starting to take over territories, even while their diplomats try to persuade Menelik to stop making such a scene. And Menelik might have given in to their demands if not for Taytu. Turns out she always distrusted the Italians. She was against this treaty from the start. She even warned her husband
that it was the first time in the history of Ethiopia that an emperor had given away part of the country,
and said that he would pay dearly for it. Throughout the negotiations, she pushed him to be tougher, asking,
"How is it that Emperor Johannes never gave up a handful of our soil, fought the Italians and Egyptians for it, even died for it, and you, with him as an example, want to sell your country? What will history say of you?"
No surprise, then, that the Italian negotiators came to loathe having Taytu in their meetings. One of them wrote, "The Empress was even fiercer than Menelik. Among other things she said was, 'I am a woman and do not love war, but sooner than accept this, I prefer war.'" In 1895, when Menelik declares war on Italy, they think it's gonna be easily won. But Italy is a baby kingdom. It barely has an army, much less an actual empire. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's economy is much stronger, and Menelik is a veteran of war. On October 11th, 1895, Menelik mobilizes an army of 100,000 soldiers, and they set out for Addis Ababa to meet the Italians. This time, Empress Taytu isn't going to be left behind. She rides on a mule beside her husband, with 100 of her ladies and her own personal army of about 5,000 soldiers, all of whom she clothes, feeds, and arms herself. French journalist Mandine Vidaye, who travels with Menelik, wrote of the Empress,
"Her soldiers kept perfect order. Her Majesty, like all Ethiopian women, is very brave. She has a strong character, sometimes haughty, and is of interesting appearance. Her look is commanding, and at the same time has finesse. In sum, she is a great lady, who perhaps, in another milieu, would have been a Christine of Sweden or Catherine the Great."
Their first clash is a swift and decisive Ethiopian victory. Empress Taytu assumes command of the hospital brigade. According to one chronicler, when wounded soldiers and Italian prisoners begin returning to camp, Taytu confronts them, saying,
"Where are you going when your king has not yet returned? Give me your wounded and go back."
Good luck trying to get out of active duty when Taytu's on board. The second major engagement is more complicated. After their initial assault fails, the Italians retreat to an old fort. Taytu steps forward and proposes a plan. Why don't we dispatch 900 men to occupy a ravine near the fort and cut off its water supply, she suggests. Hardcore, but potentially effective. Menelik follows her advice, and you know what? It works a treat. Desperation sets in quickly within the fort. Italian soldiers start leaping off the walls to escape their thirst. The siege continues for months, when the parched Italians finally request terms. The savvy Taytu distrusts the Italian envoy, though, remarking,
"That man, it seems to me, has not come for reconciliation, but to spy on us."
And she's right, of course. The Italian major demands a renewal of the old treaty and the return of all territory seized by Ethiopia. Seems to me you're not in a position to make demands, but you know what? I like your energy. Menelik, of course, is having none of this. With no relief in sight and suffering from thirst and starvation, the Italians finally surrender. Menelik, choosing mercy over vengeance, allows them to retreat. The final battle of the First Italo-Ethiopian War takes place in March of 1896. As always, Taytu is front and center. An anonymous source wrote of her,
Her Majesty went with the Emperor to the outer limits of the camp and organized the defense perimeter with the 5,000 men of her personal army. What happened then would have made Europeans laugh.
Laugh? More like wet your wartime pantaloons, fool! Taytu collects the 10 or 12,000 women marching with the army and gives them water jugs. They fill them at the river, then stand ready to run through the heat of battle to give them to thirsty soldiers in the field. Hundreds more women stay in camp, prepared to care for the wounded. Others get in on some guerrilla warfare action, interrupting supply lines, harassing caravans, and even taking up arms themselves. Taytu is there, in the thick of the action, praying loudly while shells rain down, and shouting encouragement to the soldiers manning the cannons. This women's army, led by the Empress, changes the nature of warfare in Ethiopia forever. When the battle ends, the Italians have lost around 6,000 men, and the Ethiopians have captured around 2,000 prisoners, almost half of the Italian army. The war is over. Menelik and Taytu have won. An African nation defeating a European one shocks the world, and it makes Ethiopia a symbol of the anti-colonization movement. Their victory gains Ethiopia international cred, the respect of European powers, and some glowing articles in papers like the New York Times. The Italian papers, however, make a point of attacking Empress Taytu. They clearly didn't like being bested by a lady. One of these articles contains the revelation that she bathed in the blood of virgins to stay beautiful, that old chestnut, and makes sure to discuss her many marriages, assuming it will sully her image with the public. Another accuses her of mutilating prisoners, killing hostages, and forcing Menelik to wage the war. A popular expression arises in Italy to describe a woman with too tight a grip on her husband. Who does she think she is? La Regina Taytu? It's meant as an insult, but you know what? I'll bet Taytu would have loved it. Despite all the bad blood with the Italians, it turns out Menelik has kept a tight friendship with Russia. After the war, the Tsar sends the Russian Red Cross to Ethiopia to help Menelik care for his soldiers. The royal couple receives them with open arms. One of the doctors writes of the Empress,
I saw the Empress many times, twice, against all etiquette. She attended operations to extract necrotic bone from those wounded at Adwa. It was a difficult operation. She wept several times in the operating room, but stayed until the end.
The Russian Red Cross stays in Ethiopia for a little over 2 months, as there are so many people in need of help. Around 5,000 patients, many civilians, not soldiers, suffering from STDs, skin problems, and chronic gastroenteritis from eating raw meat, a favorite meal. They're so helpful that the emperor asks them to produce a booklet of medical advice for local Ethiopian physicians, and asks that they leave a skeleton crew behind to train them. He inaugurates an Ethiopian chapter of the Red Cross, funded by none other than the Empress herself.
Ethiopia does not have and cannot have friends other than the Russians.
Taytu remarks to one of the Russian diplomats.
Only they want good for my country. All other Europeans crave our destruction.
Despite recent experience, her husband isn't nearly as wary of foreigners. He eagerly hires them to help build infrastructure projects like electric lighting for the palace, along with a piped-in water system. They also help Menelik build a series of major new roads. Menelik is all about making Ethiopia modern, and despite her reservations about outsiders, Taytu is on board for it as well. She helps finance one of these roads and often goes to oversee construction. She is an inspiring presence. As one bystander wrote,
She was so happy about it. She had a portable parasol covered with red silk and lion's hair from which cloth hung down like a wall, carried over by men. The attendants who followed her, both men and women, brought stones picked up from around the area and competed to see who could bring down the greatest quantity of rocks.
But she does much more for her people. She builds the Itoto Mariam Church. She starts an initiative to educate homeless orphans to become deacons and priests. And she erects the country's first hotel, which is named in her honor. In trying to curry Menelik's favor, European diplomats bring the couple all sorts of modern tech, a gramophone and a cinematograph. But the best present comes from the British, a machine containing a recording from Queen Victoria herself. Both Menelik and Taytu record a message back to her, with Taytu saying,
I, Itege Taytu, Light of Ethiopia, say to the very high Queen Victoria, the great Queen of the English, may God give you health. Your phonograph has reached me, and now, since God has the will to bring my voice to the ear of the Honorable Queen, I declare, God give you health and long life.
Menelik is, shall we say, a little bit overambitious with his building. He's one of those guys who starts 12 craft projects and can't seem to get any of them done. When he sends 20,000 soldiers to start working on building a second capital city, as well as an imperial residence based on the Palace of Versailles, Taytu is the one who has to rein him in. She often has to pump the brakes on starry-eyed Menelik's more impractical passion projects. And so he often tells his engineers,
Don't tell the Empress about our discussions, as she will harass me.
His advisors also don't like how many foreigners he's inviting into the country. But Menelik stands firm. He feels his people have a lot to learn from them. And while Taytu gets a rep for hating foreigners and progress, neither of these things are strictly true. Dr. Karl Volbrecht, one of the German doctors who treats the royal couple, wrote of her, They say she doesn't like foreigners and distrusts Europeans. The first is not true. She knows the worth of European culture and is the one who helps to introduce it into the country. True, she does mistrust Europeans. Why did they come here, she says, to help us unselfishly? No, they all want something. Do not keep their word. She loves her country. Her philosophy is a free, independent Abyssinia for free Abyssinian people. Taytu has an excellent relationship with Volbrecht, who implores the Empress to exercise more and try gymnastics with her ladies for her health. His advice sends the court into uproar, but Menelik is down. He tells the doctors that the ladies are trying out his suggested ball games and having a very good time. We love a supportive king. Oh, sorry, emperor. But there's a dark side to Ethiopian society that we can't ignore, especially when it comes to talking about the lives of women. Slavery, sadly, is still alive and well. It's been part of Ethiopia since ancient times, and it shows no signs of going away by the 1890s, despite the efforts of several 19th century emperors. Say what we like about Emperor Tuodros, the guy who imprisoned Menelik, but at least he tried to get rid of the institution. In 1854, just before his coronation, he outlawed the slave trade, but his actions have little effect. Menelik is said not to approve of slavery. He tries to phase it out, at least on paper. But it's also said he owns thousands of enslaved people, gathered as prisoners of war. Does Taytu, though? It's hard to say. The Fetha Nagast, the Ethiopian law book we talked about earlier, says that people can be enslaved in certain circumstances. If they're taken prisoner during wartime, if they're non-Christians, or if they're the children of slaves. If you commit certain crimes, during Menelik's day, a new law comes in that says if you commit certain crimes, thievery, and, ironically, being a slave trader, or you don't pay your debts, you can become enslaved as a punishment. But all a woman has to do is to live with or marry an enslaved man to fall under the yoke herself. Women and girls are captured and shipped overseas, where they become field workers and domestic servants, and are often forced into sexual slavery. In Ethiopia, slavery won't be abolished until the 1940s. So I'm just gonna let that sit here. In 1907, things take a turn for Menelik. He suffers a cerebral hemorrhage, and then another one a year later. When he finally returns to work, he's closely monitored by the Empress and his team of European doctors. Recognizing that his health is failing, he starts making plans for what's gonna come next. The succession situation is pretty murky. Menelik has no direct male heirs to choose from. There's his uncle's grandson, the closest patrilineal next in line, and 3 boys born to the family's female line. He selects his eldest daughter's boy child, Liege Iyasu. He is named heir to the throne. Menelik still tries to rule, but by 1909, Taytu is largely doing it for him. When the Ethiopian people find out about Menelik's illness, a saying springs up.
It is the forehead of Taytu that is holding up the empire.
Taytu splitting her time between tending her husband's sickbed and trying to hold the empire together. It's too much for even this very capable woman. A truth that seems to span across time and places, sadly, is that few people are content to let a lady rule alone. Rumors swirl that Taytu is taking advantage of Menelik's illness, that she's going to start a rival kingdom in a different capital, and that she's secretly poisoning the emperor. The more people grow discontented with her rule, the more of them Taytu fires, replacing them with younger loyalists who lack the skills to effectively run the government. When Ras Tessema, the man acting as regent for the prince, warns Taytu this isn't a great idea, she finally loses her temper.
You are an imbecile,
She shouts.
And now that you have brought it up, I will tell you why you say this. You are choking with honors and money and fear death from the bullets of Europeans and tremble because you may not be able to profit from what the emperor has given you.
It's this violent outburst of naked feeling that convinces the men around her to form a coup. In March of 1910, several conspirators marched to Menelik's rooms to oust her, demanding she give up her power. In the face of this mob, she responds,
I abandon joyfully the cares of government. They are an insupportable weight for an old woman. If I carried this burden in the past, was it for myself? Certainly not. Who other than myself has fought beside Menelek and listened to all the affairs of state? I warn you, if they attack me, I shall know how to defend myself.
They station guards outside her rooms. The next day, Taytu tells the Italian diplomat, who has always been her enemy, that her life is in danger. He insists he can't interfere in Ethiopian politics. Really, buddy? He then informs the French and British diplomats, all of whom agree to stay outwardly neutral but privately support getting rid of her. Desperate, she writes letters to Russia, Britain, France, and Germany, as well as to Ethiopian churchmen, all of which say the same haunting thing.
I am prisoner in a place where I have had a crown and have commanded. You cannot be silent.
But it turns out they can, and they remain so. No one comes to this woman's aid. She tells the regent, Ras Tassema, that she's only ever done what was asked of her. She's looked after the emperor and tried to keep his good works going. So why won't they let her go? Unmoved, he tells her that she'll be imprisoned in the palace to continue caring for the emperor. She has no choice but to obey. Her betrayers set about dismantling Taytu's network of allies, imprisoning her supporters on bogus charges while she's essentially under house arrest. She tries to convince Ras Tassema to release her, at which point the French diplomat advises him,
As for Taytu, she must stay where she is. Don't try to fight delicately with her, for in that game you would lose. Don't waver. Don't see her. She would somehow manage you.
Her family tries to rebel against the conspirators, but there isn't much they can do. And then, in a little plot twist, the regent Ras Tassema dies. Again, rumors swirl that Taytu must have poisoned him. Really? All she's been doing is gardening, praying, and caring for her dying husband. Well, that and occasionally schooling a wayward man, of course. The prince, specifically. Because instead of stepping up his game for Ethiopia, he spends most of his time traveling, drinking, and enjoying the ladies, far from the politics of the capital. When he tries to show up and kick Menelek out of the palace so he can finally take up residence, Taytu refuses to let his soldiers in. The prince decides to up the drama level by cutting off their food and water, but even that doesn't work. Menelek's loyal servants just keep sneaking it in. When the prince's soldiers start shooting these servants, the palace guard return fire. 30 people die in the fighting and 60 are wounded. And though Taytu is technically a prisoner, that doesn't stop her from berating the prince about it. She schools him so hard that he actually apologizes, then leaves the capital before returning days before Menelek's death on December 12, 1913. In some ways, Menelek's death must come as a relief to Taytu, as it does to his advisors and servants. His suffering is finally over, and the prince can formally be crowned. To avoid mass panic, though, Menelek's death isn't broadcast. It's a full week before most people know he's died. Taytu is moved secretly in the middle of the night to a compound in the mountains, effectively placed into exile. The prince proves to be so terrible a ruler, he gets excommunicated from the Ethiopian church and is deposed in 1914. His father, Ras Mikhail, is crowned, but he makes a big mess by waging war against his son's detractors, which ends in more deaths than the war against the Italians. It takes a woman to clean it all up. Menelek's daughter, Zuditu, is named Empress in her own right. Though Zuditu's mother separated from Menelek when she was still very young, she grew up in his household and had a great relationship with her father and her stepmother. But there's a snag. Zuditu is married to Taytu's nephew, and the court doesn't want her influencing politics through him. Zuditu duly divorces him, saying, "Since God has chosen me, a woman, and assigned me this great crown and throne, I shall make a vow to live alone and not with a husband." So a virgin empress worked for Elizabeth I. She becomes the first and only Empress regnant of Ethiopia, despite the nobles who assured foreign diplomats who were worried about Taytu's power way back in 1909.
No woman, directly or indirectly, will ever reign in Ethiopia.
Suck on that one, boys. Taytu is crowned on February 11th, 1917, and she invites her stepmother to return to the capital. Taytu declines and requests to go to her home in Gondar to live out the rest of her days, but the cabinet sees her as too dangerous to even do that. And although Taytu is technically empress, the decision-making stays firmly in the hands of the men around her. Just 3 months later, Taytu Betul dies after a short illness in which she refuses to be seen by a European doctor. She is celebrated with a 3-day state funeral, complete with a parade and a feast, and is buried next to her husband. His legacy as the emperor who expanded, unified, and modernized Ethiopia is laudable, but it's in large part thanks to his wife that the country remained independent during their reign. At her height, she was a powerful leader, a skilled diplomat, a kind wife and ruler, and she refused to sit down and be silent, even at the end. Until next time. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, and I hope you do, leave a review and a rating wherever you listen. Tell a friend about it, follow me on Instagram at the Exploress Podcast, or become a patron. It all really helps support me and helps other people find the show. This episode was researched and written by the wonderful Carly Quinn, and recorded and produced by me. Much of the music you just enjoyed comes courtesy of Kevin MacLeod. Thank you to Joshua Stackhouse for my theme music and logo, Mr. Exploress for my show art, and the following for their vocal stylings: Nia Kwesi, Joffrey, and McDonald.